is that all those years ago when I was writing and speaking around the world and saying, actually, we live in a holographic simulation, loads of people found that hilarious. This guy's crazy. And now, from all angles, mainstream scientists and mainstream scientific studies are concluding we almost certainly live in a simulation. And Rich Terrell, who's a NASA computer scientist, came out a few weeks ago now and said, I think we live in a holographic simulation. And of course, the next thing from that is, if it's a holographic simulation, some intelligence has created it. So now we're starting to move, and as he said, it could be extraterrestrials. We're now moving into this realm where even the most perceived far out of what I was writing and talking about all those years ago is being addressed by so many mainstream scientists. And you know, when you look at the way we interact with reality, when you go out of the norms and what we're told about reality by the education system and the media and all that stuff, and you go in and you actually research what we're doing rather than what we're told we're doing, it's the most obvious simulation. How many people know that the physics of computer games are the same physics of our reality? And let's look at that in a simple way. You now see these very sophisticated virtual reality games where they put on the gloves and the headset and the audio, and they then experience a virtual reality. And if you watch these people while they're experiencing it, they are reacting as if it's real, right? What is a computer game doing? It's hijacking or hacking into the very process through which we create reality. So it's hacking into the five senses: touch through the gloves, sight through the headset, audio through the ears, and that is overriding the reality that we are decoding through the same processes, and suddenly we're seeing a virtual reality experience which seems incredibly real. The five senses are simply taking waveform information, you think of it as Wi-Fi, and they're turning it into electrical information, which is delivered to the brain, and the brain turns it into holographic digital information. In terms of visual information, everything we're seeing in this room now, and you could go out on the top of a mountain and look at a vast panorama, doesn't matter. It will all only exist in that form, in a few cubic centimeters at the back of the brain. The world we perceive to be outside of us is actually inside of us. And it's exactly the same principle as a computer on your desk taking electrical and digital information and putting it into a reality on the screen. When you look at a computer screen, you'll say, oh, that's a computer, that's the internet. But it only exists in that form on your screen. The internet doesn't exist like that anywhere else. It's electrical information and other forms of coding. Mathematics, that's what it is. And at one level, I mean, Max Tegmark at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who's written a book called Our Mathematical Universe, has pointed out, as indeed I have over the years, that on one level of our reality, it's nothing but numbers. That's all it is, numbers. And this is the level on which the esoteric art of numerology works. They're reading that level, that digital level. And so what we're doing in creating this reality we think is so real and so solid is, as I said, the body's a biological computer. We're pretty much doing, in a much more advanced and sophisticated way, what the desktop computer does to the internet. Therefore, we live in a completely different world to the one we think we do. We experience it as out there, we experience it as solid, when all it is decoded information. And when you break it down, it's quite blatantly a simulation. This is not a world. This is an information source. The internet is not a world. It's an information source that appears to be a collective global world in terms of you can log on it anywhere in the world. But what are you logging onto? An information source. What are we logging onto through this biological computer? An information source within a certain narrow band of frequency, which gives us the illusion of looking into a space. Even that's an illusion too. And believing that we're seeing everything in the space we're looking at, when we're seeing a tiny, tiny fraction of it. So then you start to realize that all these mysteries, esoteric mysteries, mysteries of things like ghosts and all these esoteric things that science dismisses. And science dismisses them for a simple reason. It can't explain them. And we have this extraordinary arrogance in mainstream science, where if they can't explain why it's happening, they conclude it can't be happening. But once you're coming from this direction that I'm coming from, and quantum physics is coming from, then these mysteries are no longer mysteries in the way they were before, because we're not dealing with solidity. And that takes us into another level of human enslavement. If we're not talking about solidity, we're not talking limitation of solidity either. And so once we start to understand how reality works, many of the things that we couldn't do if the world was literally solid, we suddenly can do. And just a few yards from where we're speaking now is the statue of Nikola Tesla. Tesla was saying, I mean, he died in 1943. He was saying way back that science has to go into the realms of frequency and vibration beyond the world of the seen. And if it did so, it would vastly advance its understanding of reality in a very short time if it would go there. And of course, it's struggling to hold its line now, but through all the period, most of the period since, and still in many cases throughout science today, it has, mainstream science has held on to this, the world is solid version of everything, when it clearly isn't. And it has to acknowledge that quantum physics exists, which shows it isn't solid. But because quantum physics exists, but what it does, quantum physics exists, and then it cracks on in its own discipline as if it doesn't. And it's extraordinary when you think about it. We have a political governmental system all over the world. We have a mainstream science outside of quantum physics. We have a medical system and a system of treating disease. We have corporations, we have an educational system, or what claims to be. We have all these institutions that dictate the world, the direction of the world, the laws of the world, the perceptions of the world, and they're all based on the world being solid when it's not, on the world being of the illusion of the world we experience being real when it's not. No wonder the world's a madhouse, when the very basis, the very foundation of what we perceive as reality is literally inverted in terms of what it really is, and everything's based on that. So how can you treat a disease most effectively when you don't even know what the body is, when you're treating it as a piece of meat? Instead of realizing that its base level is waveform energetic information. This is just the holographic projection of that waveform information. This is why more and more mainstream studies, one in Japan recently, only last year, concluded this world's a projection. Yes, it is. And, you know, why can this guy who left school at 15, never passed a major exam in his life because he didn't take one, went off to kick a ball around, first of all, when I was 15. This guy who is perceived by so many to be crazy because he's talking outside the box, how could I be writing these things all that time ago, and now mainstream science is catching up? Why? Because of something Tesla said. You can think deeply and be quite insane, but you need to be sane to think clearly.